The rain hammered against the kitchen window as Simone Davis stood frozen, one hand pressed against her 6-month pregnant belly, the other gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles had gone pale. The suitcase by the door wasn't hers. The cologne hanging in the air wasn't the one she'd bought him for Christmas. And the woman standing beside her husband on their porch, one hand protectively cradling her own pregnant stomach, was someone Simone had never seen before in her life. "You can't be serious right now," Simone whispered, but the words felt distant, like they were coming from someone else's mouth. "Trevor, tell me you're not serious." Trevor wouldn't meet her eyes. After 8 years of marriage, after building a life in this small apartment in their Southeast DC neighborhood, after Sunday dinners with her mother and promises whispered late at night, he stood there looking at the floor like a stranger. His jaw was tight, his shoulders squared in that defensive way that meant his mind was made up and nothing would change it. "I'm sorry, Simone," he said quietly. "I never meant for it to happen like this. Like this. As if there was a good way to abandon your pregnant wife." The woman on the porch shifted uncomfortably. She was younger than Simone, maybe mid-20s, with straightened hair that fell past her shoulders and a designer purse Simone recognized because she'd admired it in a store window just last month. The price tag had been more than their rent. The woman's eyes darted between them, and for a brief second, Simone saw something that might have been guilt flicker across her face before it disappeared behind a mask of determination. "How long?" Simone heard herself ask. Her voice sounded hollow. "Does it matter?" "How long?" Trevor finally looked up. 10 months. 10 months. Simone's mind spun backward, calculating. 10 months ago they'd celebrated their anniversary at that restaurant in Georgetown, the one where they'd had their first date. She'd worn the purple dress he loved. He'd held her hand across the table and talked about their future, about the baby they were expecting, about how he was finally getting that promotion at the consulting firm. 10 months ago she believed every word. "I'm 3 months along," the woman said suddenly, her voice higher than Simone expected. "Trevor and I were having a daughter." The world tilted. Simone's hand went to her own belly, protective and instinctive. A son. She was having a son. The ultrasound picture was still on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet that said, "Baby on board." She'd spent last weekend painting the spare bedroom a soft blue, standing on a step stool despite her mother's protests, because Trevor had said he was too busy with work. "Get out," Simone said. Her voice was steady now, cold and clear. "Get out of my house." "Simone, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain, Trevor. You made your choice." She walked to the door, threw it open wide. The evening air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust from the street below. "Take your suitcase and go." "The apartment is in my name," Trevor said, and there it was, the cruelty she'd never seen in him before. "I've already talked to my lawyer. You need to be out by the end of the month." The end of the month. 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to find a new place to live while 6 months pregnant and suddenly without his income. Simone felt the floor disappear beneath her feet, but she refused to let him see her fall. She'd learned from her mother and her grandmother before her that black women didn't get the luxury of falling apart in front of the people who hurt them. "You saved your tears for your pillow and your prayers for the midnight hour." "Fine," she said. "But I want you gone right now." Trevor picked up his suitcase. The woman, Candace, Trevor had called her, followed him down the steps to where a sleek black car Simone had never seen waited at the curb. She watched from the doorway as he loaded his suitcase into the trunk, as Candace slid into the passenger seat, as he walked around to the driver's side without looking back even once. The car pulled away into the rain, red taillights disappearing around the corner. Simone stood there until the cold made her shiver, until the neighbor's dog stopped barking, until she couldn't feel her fingers gripping the doorframe anymore. Then she closed the door, locked it, and slid down to the floor with her back against the wood. That's where her mother found her 2 hours later, after Simone had finally managed to call, her voice breaking on the word, "Mama." Diane Davis took one look at her daughter and didn't waste time on questions. She just pulled Simone into her arms and let her cry, rocking her the way she had when Simone was small and the world felt too big and too cruel. "Baby, I got you," Diane whispered into her daughter's hair. "I got you and we're going to get through this. You hear me? We're going to get through this." But as Simone clung to her mother in the wreckage of her marriage, as her son kicked inside her belly like he was fighting his own battles already, she couldn't imagine how. She couldn't see past the next hour, let alone the next week or month or year. All she could see was the empty space where her husband had stood, where her life had been, where her future was supposed to go. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, something in Simone's chest cracked open, and she wasn't sure if it would ever close again. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday. Simone was 7 months pregnant, standing in her mother's cramped kitchen making breakfast, when the certified letter arrived. Her hands shook as she read the legal language that basically said, "You have 14 days to vacate the premises." "He actually did it," she said, staring at the paper. "He really put me out." Diane looked up from the eggs she was scrambling. At 58, her mother still moved with the energy of someone half her age, but the lines around her eyes had deepened over the past month. Worry did that to a person. "Baby, you already moved your stuff here," Diane said gently. "That apartment's just walls now. We're going to focus on what matters, keeping you healthy and getting ready for that grandbaby of mine." Simone folded the letter and set it aside, pressing both hands against the counter. The apartment had been walls, yes, but it had also been the last physical reminder of her marriage, of the life she'd built. Letting it go meant accepting this new reality. 29 years old, pregnant, living in her childhood bedroom at her mother's 2-bedroom house in Northeast D.C. The house was the same one Simone had grown up in, a narrow row house on a street where everybody knew everybody's business. Mrs. Patterson next door had already stopped by 3 times with casseroles and questions Simone didn't want to answer. The ladies from her mother's church had started a prayer circle. Even the mailman had given her a sympathetic look when he handed over bills addressed to her at this address instead of her old one. "I need to find a job," Simone said. "A real job. Something with benefits." She'd been doing freelance interior design work for the past 3 years, small projects here and there, helping neighbors rearrange furniture, picking paint colors, staging homes for real estate agents. It had been enough when Trevor's consulting salary covered their bills. Now it felt like playing pretend. "What about that office building project you told me about?" Diane asked. "The one downtown?" Simone shook her head. "They went with someone else. Said they needed someone who could work longer hours. Someone who wasn't visibly pregnant and about to take maternity leave, was what they meant." Nobody said it out loud, but Simone heard it anyway. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Another message from Trevor's lawyer about dividing assets. Simone deleted it without reading. There weren't any assets to divide. The car was in his name, the furniture had mostly been his grandmother's, the savings account had mysteriously emptied the week before he left. Her lawyer, a tired woman named Ms. Roberts who worked out of a storefront office near the courthouse, had already told her, "Honey, by the time we fight him on this, you'll have spent more in legal fees than you'd get back. Sometimes you just have to cut your losses." Cut your losses. As if 8 years of marriage were just numbers on a balance sheet. Rashida showed up around lunchtime with Thai food and the kind of aggressive optimism that made Simone want to cry and laugh at the same time. They'd been best friends since their sophomore year at Howard University, had been in each other's weddings, had planned to raise their kids together. Except Rashida was still climbing the corporate ladder at a PR firm downtown, while Simone's ladder had collapsed. "All right, let's talk strategy," Rashida said, spreading takeout containers across Diane's kitchen table. "First, we're going to get you set up on every freelance platform that exists. Upwork, Fiverr, that new one everyone's talking about. Second, I'm putting the word out at my office that you're available for consultations. Third, Rashida, I'm grateful, but who's going to hire someone who's about to pop out a baby? Plenty of people if you market it right. You're not pregnant, you're motivated. You're not unavailable, you're building a client base for when you open your own design firm." "My own firm?" Simone almost laughed. "Girl, I'm trying to figure out how to afford diapers. And you will. But you're also going to think bigger than just surviving, Simone. You're going to build something." Rashida leaned across the table, her eyes fierce. "Trevor took a lot from you. Don't let him take your dreams too." That night, after her mother had gone to bed and the house was quiet except for the tick of the old clock in the hallway, Simone sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. She'd created accounts on 3 freelance platforms, uploaded photos of her past projects, written descriptions that made her small jobs sound impressive. She'd sent emails to every real estate agent she'd ever worked with, letting them know she was available for home staging. She'd even joined online groups for interior designers and introduced herself, though her fingers had hesitated over the keyboard before she hit post. The baby kicked hard and insistent. Simone put her hand on the spot, felt her son's heel or elbow or maybe his head pressing against her palm. "Just you and me," she whispered. "But we're going to be okay. I'm going to make sure we're okay." 2 weeks later, Simone went into labor at 3 in the morning. Diane drove her to the hospital, holding Simone's hand through every contraction, timing them with the precision of someone who'd been through this before. The delivery was long and hard, 14 hours of pain that made Simone understand why her ancestors had been warriors. When they finally placed her son on her chest, squalling and perfect and smelling like that specific newborn smell that can't be described, Simone cried for the first time since Trevor left. "Isaiah," she said, tracing her finger along his tiny cheek. "Your name is Isaiah Marcus Davis." Isaiah, after her grandfather who'd built his own business from nothing. Marcus, after her father who'd died when Simone was 12 but who'd loved her mother with the kind of devotion that Simone had thought was eternal. Names that meant something. Names that carried weight and history and hope. Trevor didn't show up at the hospital. He'd sent a text, "Heard you're in labor. Congrats." Like she was an acquaintance announcing good news on social media. Simone deleted it and turned off her phone. This moment was hers and her mother's and Isaiah's. Trevor had forfeited his right to be part of it. The first week home was survival in its purest form. Simone barely slept, learning to breastfeed through cracked nipples and exhaustion, changing diapers at 2 and 4 and 6 in the morning, trying to remember to eat something besides crackers. Her mother was a saint, taking the night shift when she could, doing laundry, keeping the house running. But there were moments, alone in the dark with Isaiah crying in her arms, when Simone felt like she was drowning. Still, every time she looked at her son's face, at his dark eyes and perfect little nose, at the way his hand curled around her finger with surprising strength, she found something she thought Trevor had taken: determination. The child support papers came when Isaiah was 3 weeks old. Trevor's lawyer had calculated the bare minimum based on his adjusted income, $250 a month. Simone stared at the number and wanted to laugh. $250 wouldn't even cover diapers and formula if her milk dried up. But Ms. Roberts told her the same thing she always did: "You can fight it, but it'll cost more than you'll win." So Simone signed the papers and focused on what she could control. She took on a virtual staging project for a real estate agent in Virginia, working on her laptop during Isaiah's naps. She picked up a consultation for a young couple in Adams Morgan who wanted to maximize their small apartment. She said yes to every small job, every tiny opportunity, every chance to build something from the wreckage. 3 months after Isaiah was born, Simone got her first real break. A client whose living room she'd redesigned the year before called about her mother's house. The mother, Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, was a retired teacher with a 3-story Victorian in Shepherd Park that hadn't been updated since 1987. "My mother's particular," the client warned. "But she loved what you did with our place. If you can handle her, it's a big job." Full house redesign. Simone met Mrs. Thompson on a gray November morning, Isaiah strapped to her chest in a carrier because she couldn't afford a babysitter. The older woman answered the door in a purple tracksuit and house shoes, looked Simone up and down, then smiled. "You brought the baby," Mrs. Thompson said. "Good. I like people who don't pretend their life is perfect. Come on in." The house was a time capsule: floral wallpaper, brass fixtures, carpet in colors that hadn't been popular since the Cold War. But it had good bones, tall ceilings, beautiful crown molding, and windows that let in light like a blessing. "I want it updated but still mine," Mrs. Thompson said. "I want to see my style in it, not some magazine's idea of what an old black woman's house should look like." Simone pulled out her tablet, started taking notes and photos. Isaiah slept against her chest, his little mouth slack with contentment. As she worked, sketching ideas and listening to Mrs. Thompson's stories about teaching in D.C. public schools for 40 years, Simone felt something she hadn't felt in months: hope. "I can work with your budget," Simone said finally. "And I can make this house feel like you while bringing it into this decade." Mrs. Thompson studied her for a long moment. "You're hungry," she said. "Not a question. I like that. When can you start?" They shook hands and Simone left with a signed contract and a deposit check that made her want to cry in the car. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to pay her mother back rent, to buy proper clothes for job interviews, to start thinking about moving into her own place again. That night, after Isaiah had gone down for his longest stretch of sleep, Simone sat at her mother's kitchen table with a notebook and started planning. Not just the Thompson House project, but her future. Her business. Her comeback. She wrote Davis Designs at the top of the page, then crossed it out. Trevor's name didn't deserve to be on her dreams. She tried again, Simone Davis Interior Design. Better. She wrote down goals, timelines, marketing ideas. She researched business licenses and insurance and what it would cost to make this official. Diane found her there at midnight, still writing. "Baby, you should be sleeping." "I can't, Mama. My brain won't stop." Diane sat down across from her, looked at the pages covered in Simone's neat handwriting. "You're really doing this?" "I have to. Not just for me. For Isaiah." I want him to see his mother building something, not just surviving. Diane reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. Your grandmother used to say that black women are made of stardust and steel. She'd be proud of you. Simone squeezed back, feeling the strength in her mother's grip, the strength that had been passed down through generations of women who'd found ways to thrive when the world tried to break them. Outside, the city hummed with the sound of sirens and traffic and life continuing on whether you were ready or not. Inside, Simone Davis, 29 years old, single mother, survivor of betrayal, sat at her mother's kitchen table and started building her empire from scratch. Eleanor Thompson's house took 4 months to renovate. 4 months of Simone showing up every morning with Isaiah in his carrier, meeting with contractors, choosing tile and paint and fixtures, learning to negotiate and push back and stand firm when someone tried to shortcut her vision. Mrs. Thompson watched it all with sharp eyes and the occasional comment that was half criticism, half encouragement. You let that plumber talk you down on the bathroom fixtures, she said one afternoon, catching Simone reviewing invoices at the kitchen table. Next time, don't let them make you doubt yourself just because you're young and you got a baby on your hip. Simone looked up, surprised. He said the ones I picked were too expensive. And you believed him because he's been a plumber for 20 years and you think that makes him know more about design than you do. Mrs. Thompson settled into a chair across from her. Child, I spent 40 years teaching children who thought they knew better than me. You know what I learned? Knowledge is power, but confidence is what makes people listen. It was a lesson Simone took to heart. The next contractor who questioned her choices got a detailed explanation of exactly why she'd selected what she had, backed by research and comparisons and an unwavering tone that said this conversation was informational, not negotiable. The reveal day was in March, when crocuses were starting to push through the cold ground and the city was waking up from winter. Mrs. Thompson's daughter and grandchildren came, along with some of her church friends and former teaching colleagues. Simone had spent the previous night arranging furniture and hanging art and placing the last decorative touches. When Mrs. Thompson walked through her front door and saw what Simone had created, she stopped so abruptly her daughter bumped into her from behind. The floral wallpaper was gone, replaced by warm neutral tones that made the high ceilings feel even more spacious. The brass fixtures had been swapped for brushed nickel. The carpet was now hardwood floors with area rugs and jewel tones that picked up the colors in the artwork Simone had helped select. Pieces by black artists that reflected Mrs. Thompson's heritage and style. The furniture was an elegant mix of the antiques Mrs. Thompson had wanted to keep, refinished and reupholstered, combined with new pieces that brought the rooms into the present while respecting the past. This is my house, Mrs. Thompson said slowly, walking from room to room with something like wonder in her voice. But it's also not my house. It's better. It's me but elevated. Her daughter hugged Simone. You made my mother cry. Do you know how rare that is? Simone felt tears prick her own eyes. Isaiah, now 6 months old and starting to sit up on his own, babbled from his carrier. Mrs. Thompson came over and touched his cheek gently. You did good work here, she said to Simone. Real good work. And I'm going to make sure everyone I know hears about it. She kept that promise. Within 2 weeks, Simone had 3 new consultations lined up. Within a month, she had 2 signed contracts. Mrs. Thompson had apparently spent the previous weeks calling everyone in her extensive network. Church members, former colleagues, neighbors, and telling them about the young woman who transformed her house while managing a baby and building a business from nothing. She's got something special, Simone overheard Mrs. Thompson telling someone on the phone. She listens. Really listens to what you want, then makes it better than you imagined. And she's got heart. You can see it in the details. One of those new clients was a couple in Georgetown who wanted to renovate their townhouse before putting it on the market. Another was a young professional who just bought a condo in Navy Yard and had zero design sense. The third was a small medical practice that needed their waiting room updated on a tight budget. Simone took them all. She hired a babysitter for the hours she needed to be on site. A college student named Jasmine who lived 3 doors down from Diane and needed the money. She worked during Isaiah's naps and after his bedtime, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning, sustained by coffee and determination and the growing balance in her business account. Rashida had been right, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building. The Georgetown couple, the Hendersons, had very specific ideas that contradicted each other every other sentence. Simone learned to guide them toward cohesion without making them feel steamrolled. The Navy Yard client, Brian, trusted her completely and gave her creative freedom that resulted in a space featured in a local design blog. The medical practice was challenging. Because the budget was tight, but Simone found creative solutions. Paint and lighting and affordable art, that transformed the dingy waiting room into something that actually felt healing. Each project was a stepping stone. Each satisfied client told someone else. By the time Isaiah turned 1, Simone had completed 12 projects and had a waiting list. She'd moved out of her mother's house and into a small 2-bedroom apartment in Petworth, nothing fancy but clean and safe in hers. She'd bought a used car that ran reliably. She'd opened a separate business account and started putting money away for taxes and slow months and Isaiah's future. At Isaiah's first birthday party, held in Diane's backyard with cake from the black-owned bakery on Georgia Avenue and decorations Simone had stayed up late making, Rashida pulled her aside. "You know what you need to do next?" Rashida said. "Sleep for a week? Make it official. Register your business. Get a website. Stop operating like you're just getting by and start acting like the successful designer you already are." Simone watched Isaiah smash his face into his cake, watched her mother laugh at the mess, watched the friends and neighbors who'd shown up to celebrate with them. A year ago she'd been at her lowest point. Now she was here, standing in her mother's yard with grass under her feet and sun on her face and a future that looked nothing like she'd planned but somehow felt right. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." The process of officially registering Davis Design Studio, she'd added the studio because it sounded more professional, was surprisingly straightforward. Business license, tax ID, liability insurance, a simple website Rashida helped her build that showcased her projects with before and after photos. She ordered business cards with her name and number and email in elegant font. She set up a legitimate bookkeeping system instead of the hodgepodge spreadsheet she'd been using. 2 months later, she got a call from a commercial real estate developer who'd seen her work in that Navy Yard condo featured on the design blog. They wanted to hire her to stage 3 model apartments in a new building in Columbia Heights. The budget was bigger than anything she'd worked with before. The timeline was tight. The pressure was real. "I can do this," Simone told the developer on the phone, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "I can absolutely handle this project." She hung up and immediately called Rashida. "I think I just bit off more than I can chew." "No, you didn't. You're ready for this. But you're going to need help." Rashida was right. Simone couldn't manage a project this size alone, not with Isaiah and her other clients and the 1,000 things that went into running even a small business. She put out feelers and found DeAndre, a recent graduate from Howard's design program who was talented but inexperienced and willing to work for less than market rate in exchange for mentorship. She brought in a staging coordinator she'd met through another project, a woman named Tasha who knew every rental furniture company in the DMV and could negotiate deals in her sleep. Together, they tackled the Columbia Heights project. Simone designed 3 distinct spaces that would appeal to different demographics: a young professional's modern minimalist retreat, a small family's cozy nest, a sophisticated couple's urban sanctuary. DeAndre helped source furniture and accessories. Tasha managed the logistics of delivery and setup. Simone oversaw it all, approving every choice, adjusting every placement, making sure the vision came through in the execution. The day of the developer's walkthrough, Simone woke up at 5 in the morning with anxiety clawing at her chest. This was the biggest thing she'd ever done. If she failed, it wouldn't just be her reputation on the line. DeAndre and Tasha had trusted her with their time and effort. The developer and his team arrived at 10. They walked through all 3 model apartments slowly, examining every detail. Simone stood back, watching their faces, trying to read their reactions. Isaiah was with Diane for the day, and Simone missed the comfort of his solid weight in her arms, his uncomplicated love and trust. Finally, the developer turned to her. "This is exceptional work, Ms. Davis. You've captured exactly what we needed. We'd like to discuss contracting you for our next development as well." The next development. Simone felt something unlock in her chest. This wasn't just one success. This was a door opening to a future she'd barely let herself imagine. "I'd be very interested in that conversation," she said, and her voice was steady, confident, professional. Later, after everyone had left and she was doing a final walkthrough of the apartments alone, Simone stood in the middle of the young professional's space. Clean lines, pops of color, a gallery wall of black art, a reading nook by the window, and let herself feel it. Pride. Accomplishment. The bone-deep satisfaction of creating something beautiful from nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "How did it go, baby?" Simone typed back, "I think we're going to be okay, Mama. I think we're really going to be okay." And for the first time since Trevor had walked out 2 years ago, Simone believed it completely. Trevor Davis stood in the parking lot of his apartment complex in Silver Spring, staring at his car. The Lexus had a boot on it, the 3rd time this month. Behind on payments again. He'd managed to scrape together enough for the last 2 removals, but this time he couldn't even figure out which credit card might have any available credit left. Inside the apartment he shared with Candace and their daughter, he could hear crying. Brianna was almost 2 now and she cried constantly. Candace said it was just the terrible twos. Trevor suspected it was because their daughter could sense the tension that hung in the air like humidity, thick and inescapable. "The boots on the car again," he said, closing the door behind him. Candace looked up from the couch where she was scrolling through her phone. She'd put on weight after the baby, and unlike Simone who'd always dressed comfortably, Candace seemed angry about it, constantly buying clothes that didn't fit and then refusing to wear them. The apartment was scattered with her shopping bags. Retail therapy she insisted she needed, charged to credit cards that were probably as maxed out as his. "So take an Uber to work," she said without looking up. "I got laid off, Candace. 2 weeks ago. Remember?" Now she looked up. "You got another interview lined up?" "Not yet." The consulting firm he'd moved to after leaving his old job, the one where he'd been up for promotion when he left Simone, had done a round of layoffs. Trevor had been in the first wave. They'd said something about performance metrics, but Trevor knew the truth. He'd been coasting for months, distracted, making mistakes, not putting in the hours he used to. "So what are we supposed to do?" Candace stood up, Brianna wailing louder in her playpen. "We're already 2 months behind on rent, Trevor. My mother keeps calling asking why I need to borrow money. I can't even get my nails done anymore." Trevor wanted to point out that nails were the least of their problems. Rent, car payments, credit cards, Brianna's daycare. The bills stacked up like weights on his chest, pressing down until he could barely breathe. "I'm trying," he said. "I'm sending out resumes every day. Like you tried at your last 2 jobs? Like you tried to keep us afloat." Candace grabbed her purse. "I'm going to my mother's. Figure something out, Trevor. I mean it." She scooped up Brianna and left without another word. Trevor stood in the sudden silence of the apartment and felt something close to relief that they were gone, immediately followed by guilt that he felt relieved his own daughter was elsewhere. How had it gotten this bad? He thought about Simone sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep because anxiety kept his mind spinning. Wondered what she was doing, whether she'd forgiven him, whether she ever thought about him. He'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd started some kind of design business, that she was doing okay. The child support came out of his account automatically every month, when he had enough in there to cover it, so he knew she was getting that. He told himself that was enough, that he was doing his part. But late at night, alone in an apartment that felt less like a home and more like a waiting room for his life to start making sense again, Trevor knew better. He knew he'd destroyed the best thing he'd ever had for a fantasy that had turned out to be made of tissue paper and promises neither of them could keep. His father called the next day. Robert Davis was a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. Trevor had been avoiding his calls, but this time he answered. "You need to come by the house," Robert said. "Dad, I'm kind of in the middle of..." "Now, Trevor. We need to talk." Trevor took an Uber to his parents' house in Fort Washington. His mother answered the door, gave him a hug that felt more worried than warm, then sent him back to his father's study. Robert was sitting behind his desk, the same desk where Trevor had done homework as a kid, where he'd gotten to talk about college and responsibility and what it meant to be a black man in America. "Sit down, son." Trevor sat. His father looked at him for a long moment, the way he used to when Trevor had done something wrong and was waiting to see if Trevor would confess before he had to be called out. "How bad is it?" Robert asked. "What do you mean?" "Don't play with me. Your mother ran into Candace's mother at the grocery store. Heard about the layoff, the money troubles. So I'm asking, how bad is it?" Trevor told him. "All of it. The debts, the failed jobs, the apartment they couldn't afford, Candace's spending, his inability to keep anything stable." With every word, he felt smaller, like he was shrinking back into the kid who'd disappointed his father instead of the man he'd thought he'd become. "And Isaiah?" Robert asked quietly. "Your other child. When's the last time you saw him?" Trevor looked at his hands. "I send the child support." "That wasn't my question." "It's complicated, Dad. Simone doesn't want me around." "Have you asked? Have you tried?" The truth was Trevor hadn't. He told himself Simone was better off without him, that Isaiah didn't need a father who couldn't get his life together. But sitting in his father's study, he recognized those excuses for what they were: cowardice. "I messed up," Trevor said, his voice cracking. "I messed up everything and I don't know how to fix it." Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You can't fix the past, Trevor. But you can stop making it worse. That boy deserves to know his father." Not the money you send but you. And Simone deserves better than you running away twice. Once when you left her, and again when you're too ashamed to face what you did. She hates me. Maybe. But that's her right. Your job isn't to make her stop hating you. Your job is to be accountable. To be present for your son. To stop living like you're the victim of your own choices. The words hit like physical blows. Trevor wanted to argue, to defend himself, but every excuse dried up in his throat. His father was right. About all of it. I don't even know where to start, Trevor admitted. You start by showing up. You call Simone, you ask to see Isaiah, and you show up. Not once. Every time. You be consistent even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's what fathers do. Trevor left his parents' house with something that might have been determination or might have been fear. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. He sat in the Uber on the way back to his apartment and pulled out his phone. Simone's number was still in his contacts. He'd deleted and restored it a dozen times over the past 2 years, unable to commit to either keeping the connection or cutting it completely. He started typing a text. Simone, I know I don't have the right to ask, but I'd like to see Isaiah. I want to be in his life. His finger hovered over the send button. What if she said no? What if she laughed at him? What if she had moved on completely and his presence would only cause problems? But then he thought about his father's words. Show up. Be accountable. He hit send. The response came 3 hours later, and it was shorter than he expected. We can talk. Call me tomorrow after 6 p.m. Trevor read it over and over, looking for emotion in those few words. Was she angry? Indifferent? Had she been waiting for him to reach out? Or was this just her being practical? He couldn't tell. But she'd said yes to talking, and that was more than he deserved. When he got back to the apartment, Candace was there with Brianna. His daughter ran to him with that toddler excitement that still managed to pierce through all his other feelings, and Trevor picked her up and held her tight. I need to tell you something, he said to Candace over Brianna's head. I reached out to Simone. I'm going to try to be in Isaiah's life. Candace's expression went through several shifts. Surprise, anger, fear, resignation. Finally she just nodded. You should. He's your son. It wasn't an enthusiastic endorsement, but it wasn't a fight either. Trevor would take it. That night he made a list. Find job. Fix finances. See Isaiah. Be better. The list was simple but overwhelming. He'd spent 2 years sliding downward, making excuses, blaming circumstances. Climbing back up was going to be harder than falling down had been. But for the first time in a long time, Trevor Davis decided to try. The meeting took place at a playground in Rock Creek Park on a Saturday afternoon in late spring. Simone had picked the location deliberately, public, neutral, with plenty of witnesses. She arrived early with Isaiah, who at 3 years old was all energy and curiosity, climbing on everything and asking why about everything else. Mama, why are the swings moving? He asked, pointing at the empty swings drifting in the breeze. The wind is pushing them, baby. Why? Because that's what wind does. Why? Simone smiled despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Just because, Isaiah. Go slide, I'm right here watching. She spotted Trevor before he saw her. He'd aged in 3 years, not badly but noticeably. There was gray in his hair now, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there. He was thinner, dressed in jeans and a polo shirt that looked worn but clean. Not the polished professional she'd been married to, but not a mess either. Somewhere in between. Isaiah was at the top of the slide when Trevor approached. Simone stood up from the bench, crossing her arms. Simone, Trevor said, stopping a respectful distance away. Trevor. She kept her voice neutral. He's the one in the red shirt. On the slide. They both watched as Isaiah whooshed down the slide and immediately ran back to do it again. Trevor's face did something complicated, pain and wonder and regret all mixed together. He's beautiful, Trevor said softly. He is. Simone sat back down on the bench. After a moment, Trevor sat on the other end, keeping space between them. So talk. You said you wanted to be in his life. Trevor took a breath. I know I have no right to ask. I know I walked away and I've been absent and I haven't earned anything. But my father talked to me and he was right. Isaiah deserves to have a father, and I need to at least try to be that for him. Where was this when he was born? When he was learning to walk? When he said his first word? I don't have a good answer. I was a coward. I was dealing with my own mess and I used that as an excuse to not deal with my responsibilities. Simone looked at him, trying to read sincerity versus performance. Trevor had always been good with words. That's how he'd wooed her in the first place, back when they were young and stupid and thought love was enough. What changed? She asked. I lost my job. My relationship with Candace is falling apart. My life is basically a disaster. He laughed bitterly. Not great reasons, I know. Makes it sound like I'm only here because I hit rock bottom and suddenly remembered I have another kid. Is that why? Partly, he admitted. But also because my father asked when the last time I saw Isaiah was, and I didn't have an answer. And I looked at myself and didn't recognize who I'd become. I don't want to be the kind of man who abandons his son. Isaiah noticed them talking and came running over, all sweaty and excited. Mama, did you see how fast I went? I did, baby. You were super fast. Simone touched his cheek, then gestured to Trevor. Isaiah, this is someone I want you to meet. This is Trevor. Isaiah looked at Trevor with the open curiosity of a 3-year-old. Hi. Hi, Isaiah. Trevor's voice caught on his son's name. It's really nice to meet you. Want to see me go down the slide? I'd love to. Isaiah grabbed Trevor's hand with the casual trust of childhood and pulled him toward the playground. Simone watched them go, her heart doing something painful in her chest. She'd imagined this moment in 1,000 different ways over the past 3 years. Sometimes with anger, sometimes with vindication, sometimes with sadness. But watching her son's small hand in his father's large one, she mainly felt tired. For the next hour, Trevor played with Isaiah. He pushed him on the swings, caught him at the bottom of the slide, helped him across the monkey bars. Isaiah chattered nonstop the way he always did, sharing every random thought that crossed his mind. Trevor listened to all of it with an attention that seemed genuine. When Isaiah got tired, they sat at a picnic table and Simone pulled out snacks from her bag. Trevor watched as she handed Isaiah a juice box and crackers, as she reminded him to say please as she wiped chocolate off his mouth. You're a good mother, Trevor said quietly. I have to be. I'm all he's got. Not anymore. If you'll let me, I want to be consistent. I want to show up. Simone met his eyes. Here's what I need from you, Trevor. I need you to think really hard about whether you can actually commit to this. Because Isaiah's at the age where he'll remember. If you come into his life and then disappear again, that's going to hurt him. I'd rather you stay gone completely than do that to him. I understand. Do you? Because 3 years ago you walked away from me when I was pregnant. You walked away from the life we built. You chose someone else and I've made peace with that. But this isn't about me and you anymore. This is about Isaiah. And if you're going to do this, you have to do it right. I will. I promise. Don't promise. Just do it. They worked out an arrangement. Supervised visits twice a month to start at places Simone chose with her present. Trevor agreed to everything without argument. He also agreed to start going to counseling, Simone's condition not negotiable. If you're going to be in his life, I need to know you're working on your stuff, she said. I need to know you're not going to bail when things get hard. Over the following months, Trevor showed up. Every scheduled visit on time, usually early. He brought appropriate toys and books. He listened when Simone gave him instructions about Isaiah's routines and preferences. He didn't try to buy Isaiah's affection with expensive gifts he probably couldn't afford anyway. He just showed up. Isaiah slowly warmed to having Trevor around. He started asking about him between visits. When's Trevor coming? And Simone had to explain in simple terms that Trevor was his daddy, that they'd meet sometimes, that it was okay to love him. Do you love him, Mama? Isaiah asked one night at bedtime. Simone paused, brushing Isaiah's hair back from his forehead. I used to love him very much. Now I care about him because he's your daddy. That's a different kind of love. Oh. Isaiah thought about this. Is he going to live with us? No, baby. But he's going to be in your life. Is that okay? Isaiah nodded, already half asleep. Okay, Mama. Trevor's presence in Isaiah's life meant Simone had to see him regularly. It was strange, navigating co-parenting with the man who'd shattered her life. Sometimes she looked at him playing with their son and felt the ghost of who they'd been together. Other times she felt nothing but relief that she'd built a life without him. After 3 months of supervised visits, Trevor asked if he could take Isaiah for a few hours alone. I want to take him to the zoo, he said. Just us. I'll have him back by dinner. Simone's instinct was to say no. But Isaiah was asking to spend time with Trevor now, and Trevor had been consistent. She'd set the test and he'd passed it so far. Okay, she said. But you call me every hour with an update. Trevor took Isaiah to the zoo. He called after an hour to say they were looking at the pandas. He called after 2 hours to say Isaiah wanted pizza. He called before they left to say they were on the way back. When he returned Isaiah, her son was chattering excitedly about the lions and the ice cream Trevor had bought him and how his daddy said they could go to the aquarium next time. His daddy. Simone absorbed the words, the casual ownership Isaiah now claimed over Trevor's presence in his life. He had a good time, Trevor said, Isaiah already pulling at Simone's hand to tell her everything again. Thank you for trusting me with him. Don't make me regret it, Simone said, but there was less ice in her voice than there had been. Later that night, after Isaiah was asleep, Rashida came over with wine and takeout. So how are you handling the Trevor situation? Rashida asked, stabbing at her pad thai. I don't know. It's weird. He's actually being a decent father, which is not something I expected. But I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. For him to disappear again or mess up or prove that this is just temporary. I can't let my guard down. That's probably smart. But also, Simone, you can't live the rest of your life waiting for people to leave. He hurt you bad. I get it. But maybe some people actually do change. Maybe. Simone sipped her wine. Or maybe he's just going through a phase and when his life stabilizes, he'll forget about us again. And if he doesn't? If he actually sticks around and becomes a real presence in Isaiah's life? Simone didn't have an answer for that. She'd spent 3 years building walls around herself and her son, creating a life that didn't need Trevor Davis in it. Having him show up now, genuinely trying, was like someone moving furniture in a house she'd just finished arranging. Everything felt off balance. I guess we'll see, Simone said finally. One visit at a time. But even as she said it, she felt something shifting inside her. Not forgiveness exactly, and definitely not reconciliation. But maybe, possibly, the smallest beginning of peace with the past. Simone stood in the middle of her new office space and felt something close to disbelief. The office was small, just 2 rooms and a shared workspace in a converted warehouse in Shaw, but it was hers. Real furniture, not hand-me-downs. A proper desk with her laptop and a monitor. A consultation area with a couch and coffee table where she could meet clients. The wall behind her desk displayed framed photos of her best projects, her business license, and a quote from Maya Angelou that her mother had given her. We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty. It's perfect, Rashida said, setting down a box of supplies. Simone Davis Interior Design Studio has officially arrived. 4 years since Trevor had walked out. 4 years of grinding and building and slowly, persistently, creating something from nothing. The Columbia Heights project had led to 3 more developments. Those had led to magazine features and local publications. The features had led to bigger clients with bigger budgets. Each success built on the last until Simone looked up one day and realized she wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. I still can't believe this is real sometimes, Simone admitted. Well, believe it. You did this. You built this. Rashida pulled out a bottle of champagne from her bag. And now we're celebrating properly. They popped the champagne and drank it from paper cups because Simone hadn't unpacked the proper glasses yet. Isaiah, now 4.5, was at daycare for another hour, giving Simone time to get the office set up. DeAndre was coming by later to help arrange the furniture. Tasha had already dropped off staging supplies for the storage room they'd rented downstairs. It was a real team now. A real business. Simone had clients booked out for 6 months. She'd had to raise her rates twice because demand exceeded what she could handle at the old prices. She'd hired a part-time bookkeeper and was looking for another designer to bring on full-time. The financial stress that had kept her up at night for years had eased into something manageable. She wasn't rich, but she was stable. More than stable, she was comfortable. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lawrence Henderson. Good luck today. Can't wait to see the new space tonight. Simone smiled. Lawrence had entered her life 6 months ago, though she'd first met him over a year before that. He'd been her client, a divorce looking to update his house in Maryland before his teenage daughter moved in full-time. He'd been professional and respectful throughout the project, never crossing lines or making her uncomfortable. They'd lost touch after the project ended. Then she'd run into him at a community event, and he'd asked her to coffee. Just coffee, he'd stressed. No pressure. She'd almost said no. Dating felt like a complication she didn't need. But Rashida had practically pushed her out the door, insisting that Simone needed to at least try to have a life outside of work and Isaiah. Coffee had turned into dinner. Dinner had turned into taking things slow and seeing where they went. Lawrence was patient in a way Trevor never had been. He was steady. He'd been married for 15 years before his divorce, had gone through his own journey of rebuilding, and understood what it meant to start over. He didn't rush her or pressure her or make promises he couldn't keep. He just showed up. Consistently. The way Trevor now showed up for Isaiah. Trevor. Simone's relationship with her ex had settled into something civil, almost friendly. He'd been seeing Isaiah regularly for almost a year now, taking him every other weekend and one evening during the week. He'd gotten a new job, nothing as fancy as his old consulting position but steady work with a nonprofit that focused on financial literacy in underserved communities. The irony of Trevor teaching others about financial responsibility when he torpedoed his own finances wasn't lost on Simone, but she kept that observation to herself. Candace had left him 8 months ago, taking Brianna back to her mother's house and filing for divorce. Trevor had moved into a small apartment in Tacoma Park and seemed lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying weight he'd finally put down. He was in therapy, Simone knew because she'd insisted on continuing that as a condition of unsupervised visits, and Trevor's therapist sent monthly confirmations that he was attending. "You seem happy," Diane said later that evening, helping Simone arrange books on the office shelves. Isaiah was running around the space, excited about Mama's big office. "I'm happy, Mama." "Is that allowed?" Diane laughed. "More than allowed. Required. You've worked so hard for this, baby. You deserve every bit of it." Lawrence showed up with Thai food and flowers, which made Isaiah giggle because flowers are for dates, Mama's on a date. Simone had been careful about Isaiah meeting Lawrence. They'd taken it slow, keeping things casual until she was sure Lawrence was going to stick around. But over the past few months, Isaiah had warmed to him, especially when Lawrence showed up with a new book or spent time playing blocks without checking his phone every 5 minutes. "What do you think, Isaiah?" Lawrence asked, crouching down to the 4-year-old's level. "Pretty cool office, right?" "Mama's the best designer in the whole world," Isaiah announced with the confident loyalty of a child. "I don't know about the whole world," Simone said, but she was smiling. "Top 5 at least," Lawrence agreed solemnly, winking at her over Isaiah's head. They ate Thai food sitting on the floor because the consultation furniture hadn't been fully arranged yet. Isaiah fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from running around. Diane took him home so Simone and Lawrence could finish setting up. "You've really done something special here," Lawrence said, helping her hang the last of the project photos. "This whole journey you've been on, it's incredible. It's been necessary more than incredible. I didn't have a choice but to make it work." "You always have a choice. You chose to push forward instead of giving up. That's not nothing, Simone." Later, after Lawrence had left and Simone was alone in the office doing a final walkthrough, she let herself really feel it. Pride. Accomplishment. The knowledge that she'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened to her and transformed it into something powerful. Her business wasn't just about interior design. It was about proving that she could rebuild. That she could create beauty from broken pieces. That being left didn't mean being less than. The commercial projects kept coming. The developer who'd hired her for the Columbia Heights project brought her on for a mixed-use development in Silver Spring. A boutique hotel in Adams Morgan wanted her to redesign their lobby and common spaces. A nonprofit that provided transitional housing for women leaving domestic violence situations reached out about updating their facilities. Simone took that project at a reduced rate and poured her heart into creating spaces that felt safe and nurturing. Each project was a chance to tell a story through design. Each space she created was a reflection of her own journey, broken things made beautiful, potential realized, new beginnings made tangible. 6 months after opening her office, Simone was featured in Washington Post's style section. The article was titled, "From Survival to Success: How One Designer Built Her Business from the Ground Up." The reporter had interviewed her for hours, asking about her journey, her design philosophy, her inspirations. Simone had been honest about the divorce, about starting over with nothing, about building something meaningful from the wreckage. The day the article came out, her phone didn't stop ringing. New client inquiries. Interview requests from other publications. An invitation to speak at a Women in Business conference. Messages from people she hadn't heard from in years, some supportive, others clearly just checking to see if the story was really about her. One message stood out. It was from Mrs. Eleanor Thompson. "Saw the article. So proud of you, child. You took what I gave you and multiplied it tenfold. That's what we're supposed to do, lift as we climb. Don't forget that." Simone wouldn't forget. She'd already been thinking about how to pay forward the grace that had been shown to her. She started mentoring young designers, particularly young Black women trying to break into the industry. She offered internships to students from Howard and UDC. She made a point of hiring contractors from the communities where she worked. She tried to be for others what Mrs. Thompson and her mother and Rashida had been for her. Someone who believed in potential and invested in possibility. At Isaiah's 5th birthday party, held in their apartment's community room because her place was too small for everyone she'd invited, Simone looked around at the crowd and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Her mother, laughing with the church ladies who'd brought enough food to feed twice as many people. Rashida and DeAndre, who'd become not just colleagues but family. Lawrence, helping kids with party games like he'd been doing this forever. Mrs. Thompson, sitting in the corner with a plate of cake and a satisfied smile. And Isaiah running around with his friends, happy and healthy and loved. Trevor showed up with a gift, a building block set Isaiah had mentioned wanting. He'd called ahead to make sure it was okay to come, and Simone had said yes. It still felt strange sometimes having him at family events. But he was Isaiah's father and he was trying, and that counted for something. "Nice party," Trevor said, standing beside her while they watched Isaiah blow out his candles. "Thanks. He's having a good time. You've done an amazing job with him, Simone. With everything. That article in the Post, your business, all of it. I'm proud of you." Simone looked at him, this man she'd loved and lost and learned to coexist with. "We're in a good place now," she said. "Let's keep it that way." "Yeah. Let's." They weren't friends exactly, and they'd never be what they once were. But they'd found something workable, something healthy for Isaiah. That was enough. As the party wound down and guests started leaving, Lawrence helped Simone clean up while Isaiah crashed on the couch, sugar-drunk and exhausted. "He's a great kid," Lawrence said, tying up a garbage bag. "He is. I'm really lucky." "He's lucky too. He's got a mother who'd move mountains for him. That's not nothing." Simone leaned against the counter, watching Isaiah sleep, and felt the weight of the past 5 years settle differently on her shoulders. Not lighter exactly, but distributed better. Manageable. She'd survived the worst thing she'd thought could happen to her. She'd rebuilt from nothing. She'd created a life that was full and rich and entirely her own. And now maybe there was room for more. For Lawrence. For continued growth. For whatever came next. "Thank you," she said to Lawrence. "For being patient with me. For understanding why I had to take things slow." "Always," he said simply. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, Simone Davis, successful business owner, devoted mother, survivor and thriver, stood in her apartment and looked toward a future that no longer scared her. Simone met Lawrence's daughter on a Saturday morning in November. Hannah was 16, all sharp edges and skeptical eyes, and she made it clear from the start that she wasn't interested in her father dating anyone. "So you're the interior designer," Hannah said, looking Simone up and down in Lawrence's living room, the same living room Simone had redesigned 2 years ago. "That's me." "And you're the debate champion I've heard so much about." Hannah's expression shifted slightly. "Dad told you about that?" "He's pretty proud of you. Talks about it constantly, actually. I've heard the story about your tournament win at least 5 times. A small smile cracked through Hannah's defenses. "He's annoying about it. Parents are supposed to be annoying about being proud. It's in the job description." They spent the morning together, Simone, Lawrence, Hannah, and Isaiah. It was awkward at first, everyone too polite, trying too hard. But Isaiah, with the magical ability of children to break tension, started showing Hannah his drawings, and Hannah, despite her teenage coolness, actually seemed interested. "You're pretty good," Hannah told Isaiah, examining a crayon drawing of what might have been a dinosaur or possibly a truck. "Better than I was at your age." "Mama says I'm an artist," Isaiah announced. "Like her but with crayons." By lunch things had eased. Hannah still watched Simone carefully, especially when Lawrence touched Simone's hand or smiled at her, but the outright hostility had faded into something more like cautious acceptance. "She's protective," Lawrence explained later, after they dropped Hannah back at her mother's house. Isaiah was asleep in his car seat in the back. "Her mom and I went through a rough divorce. She's scared I'm going to get hurt again." "Or she's scared she is," Simone said. "It's hard to let new people into your family when your family's already been broken once." Lawrence looked at her. "Is that how you feel too?" "Sometimes. But I'm working on it." She was. Therapy had helped. She'd started going 2 years ago, after realizing that carrying around the weight of Trevor's betrayal was affecting every part of her life. Her therapist, Dr. Morgan, had helped her understand that healing wasn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It was about choosing not to let the past define the future. "Trevor abandoned you," Dr. Morgan had said during one session. "But that doesn't mean everyone will. Part of healing is learning to trust again, even when it's scary." Lawrence had earned that trust slowly, carefully, with consistent actions over many months. He showed up when he said he would. He listened when Simone talked about her day, her struggles, her fears. He was patient with Isaiah, never trying to replace Trevor but creating his own relationship with her son. He was honest about his own baggage, his failed marriage, his regrets, his determination to do better this time. "I'm not perfect," he told her early on. "I'm going to mess up sometimes. But I won't leave. That's my promise. When things get hard, I'll stay and we'll figure it out together." 6 months into their relationship, they'd had their first real fight. Lawrence had canceled plans at the last minute because of a work emergency, and it had triggered something deep in Simone. The rational part of her brain knew it wasn't the same as Trevor's betrayals. The wounded part couldn't tell the difference. "You promised you'd be there," she'd said, her voice tight. "And I will be just 2 hours later. Simone, my client's deal is falling apart. I have to handle this." That's what Trevor always said. Work was always more important. Lawrence had taken a breath, clearly trying to stay calm. "I'm not Trevor. I'm not abandoning you because I have to work late. This is an emergency and I'm handling it as fast as I can. But I will be there. You have to trust that." She'd hung up angry. But he'd shown up 2 hours later, exhausted and apologetic, with flowers and Thai food and a willingness to talk it through until she understood that his work emergency was real and not an excuse to avoid her. "I get that you're scared," he'd said. "I get that trusting someone after what you went through is hard. But you can't punish me for Trevor's mistakes. I need you to see me for who I am, not who he was." He was right. It was a pattern they'd have to work through more than once. Simone's fear of abandonment bumping up against normal relationship challenges. But Lawrence stayed patient and Simone stayed in therapy, and slowly they built something solid. By their 1-year anniversary, Simone knew she loved him. It wasn't the wild, passionate love she'd had with Trevor in the beginning. It was steadier than that, deeper. The kind of love that showed up in the small moments. Lawrence helping Isaiah with homework while Simone finished a project. Lawrence listening to her vent about difficult clients without trying to fix everything. Lawrence being present in ways that mattered. "I love you," she told him on their anniversary dinner. "I should have said it before now, but I was scared. I'm still scared sometimes. But I love you." Lawrence reached across the table and took her hand. "I love you too. Have for months. I was waiting for you to be ready to hear it." They talked that night about future possibilities. Living together eventually, maybe. Marriage, possibly, though neither of them was in a rush after their respective divorces. Blending their families fully. Building a life that incorporated both their kids and both their baggage and all their hopes for something better. "I want to meet your father," Simone said. "If we're talking about a future, I should meet your family. My dad's going to love you. Warning though, he's going to ask about your business and your 5-year plan and basically interview you like you're applying for a job. He's protective. I can handle protective fathers. I've got one of those myself." Meeting Lawrence's family was easier than Simone expected. His father, a retired postal worker, did indeed grill her about her business, but it came from genuine interest rather than suspicion. His mother, a woman who reminded Simone of her own mother in her warmth and no-nonsense attitude, pulled Simone aside after dinner. "That boy of mine's been through a lot," she said. "So have you, from what he's told me. Just be good to each other, okay? That's all any of us can do, be good to each other." "Yes, ma'am," Simone agreed. Trevor noticed the relationship too. He didn't say anything directly, but Simone could tell from the way he looked at Lawrence when they overlapped at drop-offs or pickups, from the questions Isaiah innocently repeated that Trevor had asked about Mama's friend. Finally, at a scheduled exchange, Trevor asked, "Is it serious?" With Lawrence. "That's not really your business, Trevor." "I know. I want you to be happy. You deserve that." Simone studied him, this man she'd once loved and now mostly felt neutral about. He looked healthier than he had a year ago. The stress lines around his eyes had eased. He'd started dressing better, carrying himself with more confidence. Therapy and stability seemed to be working for him too. "I am happy," she said. "And yes, it's serious." "Good. That's good." It was a strange moment, getting permission she didn't need from a man whose opinion shouldn't matter. But it felt like closure on something, another piece of the past settling into place. Isaiah loved Lawrence in the way kids love adults who pay attention to them. Lawrence took him to the National Building Museum and let Isaiah ask 1,000 questions about architecture. He taught Isaiah to ride a bike in the park, running beside him until Isaiah found his balance and wobbled away, triumphant. He read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, making Isaiah giggle until he was too tired to stay awake. "Is Lawrence going to be my other daddy?" Isaiah asked one night after Lawrence had left. Simone paused, folding laundry. "What do you think about that?" "I think it would be good. Then I'd have 2 daddies." Some kids at school don't even have one daddy, and I'd have two. You'd have Trevor as your daddy and Lawrence as, well, we'd have to figure out what to call it. But yes, something like that. Okay. Isaiah went back to his coloring, the matter settled in his mind with the simplicity of childhood. It wasn't that simple for the adults, of course. Blending families required patience and communication and working through jealousies and insecurities. Hannah still struggled sometimes with sharing her father's attention. Trevor had moments where he clearly felt uncomfortable with Lawrence's presence in Isaiah's life. Simone had days where the whole thing felt overwhelming and complicated. But more often than not, it felt right. Like pieces of a puzzle that didn't match perfectly but created something beautiful anyway. 18 months into their relationship, Lawrence brought up moving in together. Not rushing, he said quickly. But Hannah's going to college next year and my lease is up in 3 months, and your place is getting small for you and Isaiah. Maybe we could look for something together? A house with space for everyone. Simone's first instinct was to say it was too soon, too risky, too much. But then she thought about Dr. Morgan's words about choosing not to let fear drive her decisions. She thought about all the ways Lawrence had shown up. She thought about Isaiah asking if Lawrence was going to be his other daddy. Let's look, she said. No promises, but let's see what's out there. They found a house in Brooklyn, a 4-bedroom with a yard, close to good schools near the metro. It needed work, which Simone saw as an opportunity rather than a problem. They could make it theirs, designing it together, creating a space that reflected their blended family. It's perfect, Lawrence said, standing in the empty living room while their real estate agent waited outside. I can already see us here. Me too, Simone admitted. It's scary, but I can see it. They put in an offer. It was accepted. Closing was set for 3 months out, giving them time to prepare, to tell their kids, to make sure everyone was ready for this next step. Simone told her mother first. Diane's response was characteristically direct. You sure about this, baby? I'm sure. I love him, Mama. He's good to me, good to Isaiah. I'm not saying it's perfect or that I'm not scared, but I'm ready. Diane pulled her daughter into a hug. Then I'm happy for you. You deserve all the good things, Simone. Don't ever forget that. Telling Isaiah was easier than expected. He was excited about having a big kid around, about the yard for playing, about having his own room that he could decorate however he wanted. Telling Trevor was harder. They met for coffee while Isaiah was at school, and Simone explained about the house, about the relationship, about how it would affect their co-parenting arrangement. I'm happy for you, Trevor said, and he sounded like he meant it. Really? You've built an incredible life, Simone. You deserve someone who appreciates that. We'll work out a schedule that makes sense with the new house. I don't want this to disrupt Isaiah's time with you. I appreciate that. And Simone? Thank you. For what? For letting me back into his life. For being willing to co-parent with me even after everything I did. You could have made it impossible and you didn't. I didn't do it for you, Trevor. I did it for Isaiah. Every kid deserves to know both their parents if both parents are willing to show up. You've shown up. That's what matters now. They parted ways amicably, which felt like its own kind of miracle. 4 years ago, Simone had been standing in her kitchen watching Trevor walk out of her life. Now she was moving forward into a new life, and Trevor was genuinely happy for her. Time and healing had transformed everything. The move happened on a warm Saturday in September. Friends and family came to help. Rashida directing traffic, Diane unpacking kitchen boxes, Lawrence's parents helping assemble furniture, DeAndre and Tasha bringing pizza for everyone. Isaiah and Hannah ran around exploring the house, arguing over who got which bookshelf in the living room, settling into their new sibling dynamic. That night, after everyone had left and the kids were asleep in their new rooms, Simone and Lawrence sat on the floor of their bedroom surrounded by unpacked boxes. We did it, Lawrence said. We actually did this. We did. Simone leaned against him, exhausted and happy. Thank you for being patient with me. For giving me time to get here. Thank you for letting me in. For trusting me with you and Isaiah. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the house settle around them. Somewhere down the hall, Isaiah's sound machine hummed white noise. Outside, the city continued its eternal motion. Inside, Simone Davis had built something new, not a replacement for what she'd lost, but something different, something better. She'd learned that love didn't have to hurt. That family could be chosen and built and created from broken pieces. That the ending of one story could be the beginning of something even more beautiful. Trevor Davis sat in his apartment staring at the eviction notice. Again. For the 3rd time in 2 years. Except this time he couldn't figure out how to fix it. The nonprofit had laid him off 6 weeks ago. Budget cuts, they'd said, though Trevor suspected his performance had finally caught up with him. He'd been good at teaching others about financial literacy. He just couldn't seem to apply it to his own life. The child support for Brianna and Isaiah came out automatically now, court-ordered after Candace had finally taken him to court. Between that and the rent he couldn't afford on unemployment, he was drowning. His father had bailed him out twice. He couldn't ask again. His phone buzzed. A text from Candace. Brianna's tuition is due. Where's your half? Trevor stared at the message. He didn't have half. He didn't have a quarter of it. Brianna was in a private kindergarten that Candace had insisted on, and Trevor had agreed to split the cost back when he'd had a job. Now he was scrambling to figure out how to keep a roof over his head. He called his father. Robert answered on the third ring. I need help, Dad, Trevor said, and this time he couldn't keep the desperation out of his voice. How bad? Eviction notice. No job. Candace wants money for Brianna's school. I'm completely underwater. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Come over tomorrow. We need to have a serious talk. The next day, Trevor sat in his father's study for what felt like the 100th time, feeling like a failure yet again. His mother brought coffee and left them alone with worried eyes. Your mother wants me to help you, Robert said. Again. But I told her we need to talk first about what helping actually means. Dad, I just need enough to... Stop. Robert's voice was firm. You've been in crisis mode for 4 years, Trevor. Every time we think you're getting stable, you're back here asking for help. So before I write another check, I need to understand. What's the plan? How are you going to break this cycle? Trevor didn't have an answer. He thought he had been breaking the cycle, getting the nonprofit job, seeing Isaiah regularly, going to therapy. But somehow he kept sliding backward. I don't know, he admitted. I'm trying but nothing sticks. Here's what I see, Robert said. You're still living like the man you were, not the man you are. That apartment's too expensive for your income. You're trying to keep up appearances instead of living within your reality. And you're so focused on your immediate crisis that you're not planning for anything beyond next month. So what do I do? First, you're moving. Find something cheaper, maybe a roommate situation. Your pride's going to hate it, but your pride's what got you here. Second, you're going to get whatever job you can find, even if it's not what you think you should be doing. Work at a store, drive for a rideshare, whatever pays bills. Third, you're going to create an actual budget and stick to it. Not a rough estimate, a real written budget that accounts for every dollar. Trevor wanted to argue. He was 39 years old. He'd gone to good schools, had a decent resume. The idea of being a retail worker or a driver felt like admitting defeat. I know what you're thinking, Robert said. You're thinking it's beneath you. But Trevor, you're about to be homeless again. There's no such thing as beneath you right now. The words stung because they were true. Trevor had spent so long trying to maintain an image of success that he'd forgotten what actual success looked like. It wasn't the car or the apartment or the job title. It was stability. It was being able to take care of his responsibilities. It was showing up for his children. I'll help you one more time, Robert said. I'll pay this month's rent so you're not evicted while you figure out the next move. But that's it. After this, you're on your own. You need to figure out how to actually support yourself, not just survive crisis to crisis. I understand. Do you? Because I've been watching you bounce around for years, and I'm not sure you've really faced what you did. You destroyed your marriage. You walked away from Simone when she needed you. You've let down both your children multiple times. You're still dealing with the consequences of choices you made, and instead of accepting that and rebuilding properly, you keep trying to find shortcuts back to where you were. Trevor felt tears prick his eyes. I don't know how to fix it. You can't fix the past. You can only build a better future. That starts with accepting reality and working from where you actually are, not where you wish you were. Trevor moved 2 weeks later into a shared house in Hyattsville. His roommates were 2 guys in their 20s who worked in tech and were barely home. His room was small, barely bigger than Isaiah's room at Simone's new house. He had a twin bed, a dresser, and not much else. No space for when Brianna or Isaiah visited. It was humbling in a way that hurt. He got a job at a warehouse, loading boxes overnight. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. His body ached in ways it hadn't since college, when he'd worked construction summers. But the checks came regularly, and he started building a budget like his father had insisted. Child support, share of rent, food, gas, phone, insurance. Every dollar accounted for before he spent it. There wasn't room for much else. Eating out was a luxury he couldn't afford. New clothes were impossible. He wore the same 3 shirts and 2 pairs of jeans on rotation. His visits with Isaiah changed. He couldn't take his son to expensive places anymore. Instead, they went to parks. They walked around the neighborhood. They played board games Trevor found at thrift stores. It was humbler than the relationship he'd been trying to build, but Isaiah didn't seem to care. If anything, his son seemed happier with the simpler activities, with having his father's full attention instead of being distracted by trying to impress him. "Do you like your new house?" Trevor asked during one visit, the question coming out more bitter than he'd intended. Isaiah, now 6, nodded enthusiastically. "It's really big. And Hannah lets me use her art supplies. And Lawrence is teaching me about buildings." Trevor swallowed the jealousy. Lawrence was giving Isaiah things Trevor couldn't afford to provide. A stable home. A yard. Consistent presence. It hurt, but Trevor knew he had no one to blame but himself. "That sounds nice, buddy. Are you still sad, Daddy?" Isaiah asked with the directness of children. "What makes you think I'm sad? You always look like you're about to cry. Mama says sometimes grown-ups have hard days." Trevor pulled his son into a hug. "I do have hard days sometimes. But seeing you makes them better." Later, when he dropped Isaiah back at Simone's house, Lawrence answered the door. It was the first time they'd really interacted beyond passing acknowledgments. "Trevor, come in for a minute," Lawrence said. Trevor followed him into the living room, nervous about what this conversation might be. Lawrence gestured to the couch. "I'm not trying to replace you," Lawrence said directly. "I know that's probably a concern. But I love Simone and I care about Isaiah. I want us to be able to coexist peacefully for his sake." "I appreciate that. And I can see you're good to him. To both of them. That's what matters. How are you doing? Simone mentioned you've been going through some stuff." Trevor almost brushed it off with a polite lie. But something about Lawrence's genuine concern made him honest instead. "I've been struggling. Lost my job, had to move somewhere cheaper. I'm working nights at a warehouse and barely keeping my head above water. It's humbling." "That's tough, man. I've been there. After my divorce I was scrambling too. Took a while to stabilize." "How did you do it?" "Small steps. Consistent progress. And asking for help when I needed it instead of pretending I had it together." Lawrence paused. "Look, I know a guy who's hiring for an administration position at a construction management company. It's not glamorous, but it's decent pay, normal hours, and they have benefits. Want me to put in a word?" Trevor's pride wanted to say no. But his pride had been getting in the way for years. "Yeah. I'd appreciate that. I'll text you his info tomorrow." It wasn't a friendship exactly, but it was something. Two men who loved the same woman at different times, working together for the sake of the child they both cared about. It was mature in a way Trevor wasn't sure he'd been capable of before. The job Lawrence mentioned came through. Trevor interviewed and got hired as an administrative coordinator for a mid-sized construction firm. The pay was better than the warehouse with normal hours and health insurance. It wasn't his old consulting salary, but it was enough to start building something stable. He moved to a small one-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy but his own space. He slowly furnished it from thrift stores and discount places. He created a sleeping area for when Isaiah or Brianna visited, just an air mattress and some blankets, but it was something. His therapist helped him work through the shame of where he'd ended up. "You're making progress," Dr. Chin told him. "You've gone from crisis to stability. That's not nothing. The work now is accepting that this is your life, not some temporary situation you're waiting to escape from." "But I had so much more before." "Did you? Or did you just have the appearance of more?" Dr. Chin leaned forward. "Trevor, you had a fancy apartment and a consultant job, but you were miserable. You made terrible choices. You hurt people you loved. Having less money but being more grounded, that's not failure. That's growth." It took time for Trevor to internalize that. But slowly he started to see it. He was showing up for his kids consistently. He was paying his bills. He was sleeping at night without anxiety clawing at him. He had less, but he was more at peace. The financial literacy nonprofit called 6 months later. They'd gotten new funding and wanted to know if he'd be interested in consulting part-time, teaching some of their workshops. Trevor thought about saying yes immediately. It was his field, his passion. But he paused. "Can I think about it?" he asked. He talked to his therapist, his father, even to Simone during a drop-off when she asked how he was doing. "If it's going to destabilize what you've built, it's not worth it," Simone said. "If it's going to be extra income you can actually manage, maybe it is. You have to be honest with yourself about what you can handle." In the end, Trevor took the consulting gig. 2 evenings a month, teaching workshops about budgeting and debt management. The irony wasn't lost on him. Teaching others the lessons he'd learned the hard way. But he was good at it, and the extra income helped him start saving, actually building a cushion instead of living paycheck to paycheck. One evening after a workshop, a young man came up to him. "Thank you for this. I've been making all the mistakes you talked about, and hearing someone be real about it, about how hard it is, that helped." Trevor shook his hand. "Just pass it forward when you can." That's what he was doing now, trying to pass forward the grace he'd been given. His father's patience. His therapist's guidance. Simone's willingness to let him be in Isaiah's life. Lawrence's unexpected help. Even his own hard-won lessons. He couldn't change the past, but he could be better going forward. And slowly, painfully, Trevor Davis was learning what that actually looked like. Simone stood in the gallery space where her work was being exhibited, still not quite believing this was real. Rising, Stories of Resilience Through Design, was a showcase of projects by women designers, and 3 of her projects had been selected. The photos on the walls showed her transformation of Mrs. Thompson's house, the transitional housing spaces for domestic violence survivors, and her own home, before and after shots that told the story of rebuilding in more ways than one. "You did that?" a woman asked, standing in front of the Thompson house photos. "That transformation is incredible." "I did. Thank you. The write-up says you were a single mother starting from nothing when you began this business. That's inspiring." Simone smiled politely, though the words "starting from nothing" always stung a bit. She hadn't started from nothing, she'd started from rubble. There was a difference. Nothing implied a blank slate. Rubble meant you had to clear away the broken pieces before you could build. Lawrence came up beside her, Isaiah's hand in his. Her son was dressed in his fancy clothes, khakis and a button-down shirt that he'd already partially untucked. "Mama, can I get a cookie?" Isaiah asked, eyeing the refreshment table. "One cookie. And stay where I can see you." Isaiah ran off toward the food. Lawrence slipped his hand into hers. "You okay? You've got that look." "What look?" "The one where you're thinking too much instead of enjoying the moment." He was right. Simone had a tendency to intellectualize her success, to analyze it instead of feeling it. Probably because feeling it meant acknowledging how far she'd come, which meant acknowledging how low she'd been. "I'm just taking it in," she said. "This is surreal. It's well-deserved. Look around, Simone. All these people are here because of your talent and your story." The gallery was crowded. Diane was holding court near the refreshment table, telling anyone who'd listen about her daughter's journey. Rashida was networking aggressively, handing out business cards and talking up Davis Design Studio. Mrs. Thompson had come with several friends, all of them dressed to the nines. DeAndre and Tasha were taking photos for social media. Even Lawrence's parents had shown up, his mother already bonding with Diane over proud parent stories. Trevor had texted asking if he could come. Simone had said yes, Isaiah would be there, and it felt petty to exclude his father from this moment. She spotted him now, standing near the entrance looking uncomfortable in a dress shirt and tie. He'd lost more weight, looked older but somehow healthier than he had in years. Their eyes met across the room. Trevor nodded. Simone nodded back. Then he turned and walked over to where Isaiah was stacking cookies on a napkin. "Only one cookie," Simone called across the gallery. Isaiah looked guilty and put 3 cookies back. A local news crew was there doing a piece on women-owned businesses. They interviewed Simone for 10 minutes, asking about her design philosophy, her journey, her advice for other women starting businesses after life-changing setbacks. "Don't be afraid to start small," Simone said. "I took any job I could get in the beginning. Tiny projects, low budgets, clients who didn't know what they wanted. But each one was a step forward. Each one taught me something. You can't skip to the success part, you have to build it piece by piece." "And how do you balance being a single mother and running a business?" "I'm not a single mother anymore," Simone corrected gently. "I'm in a committed relationship and co-parenting with my son's father. But when I was doing it alone, I leaned hard on my support system. My mother, my best friend, my community. Nobody builds success completely alone. You need people who believe in you when you don't believe in yourself." After the interview, Simone found her mother. Diane was crying, trying to hide it behind a napkin. "Mama, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, baby. I'm just so proud of you I could burst. Look at all this. Look at what you've built." Your grandmother would be beside herself. They hugged, and Simone felt tears prick her own eyes. All those nights crying in her mother's kitchen. All those mornings waking up exhausted and afraid. All those moments when she'd wanted to give up but pushed forward anyway. It had led here. To this gallery, this recognition, this life. Later, as the event was winding down, Trevor approached her. Isaiah was with Lawrence looking at some of the other exhibits. "This is incredible, Simone," Trevor said. "You've really built something special." "Thank you. I need to say something. I've been working on this with my therapist and I need to say it." Trevor took a breath. "I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry for everything I did to you. Walking out when you were pregnant. The financial mess I left you in. Missing Isaiah's first years. All of it. I was selfish and cruel and you deserved so much better." Simone studied him. She'd waited years to hear this apology, this acknowledgement. But now that it was here, she found she didn't need it as much as she once thought she would. She'd healed without it. She'd moved forward without it. The apology was for Trevor's peace, not hers. "I appreciate you saying that," she said carefully. "It's taken a long time to get here." "I know. And I know I can't make up for what I did. But I want you to know I see it now. I see what I destroyed and I see what you built from that destruction. You're amazing, Simone. You always were. I was just too stupid to appreciate it. We were young. We made mistakes. You made one mistake, loving me. I made 100. There's a difference. Trevor, I've forgiven you. Not because you deserve it or because you've earned it, but because holding on to anger was weighing me down. I needed to let it go for me, not for you. Have you? Forgiven me?" Simone thought about it. "I've forgiven the hurt. I haven't forgotten what you did and will never have what we had before. But I don't hate you anymore. I'm grateful actually. You leaving forced me to become someone stronger than I would have been otherwise. That's generous. It's honest." Simone watched Isaiah and Lawrence laughing about something. "We're good now, Trevor. We're co-parenting well. You're showing up for Isaiah. That's what matters going forward. I won't let him down again. I promise you that. Don't promise me. Promise him. And more importantly, prove it by showing up. Every time. Even when it's hard." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their son. It struck Simone how far they'd both come. Her from abandonment to success, him from arrogance to humility. Different paths but both forward. Candace texted her that night. They developed an unexpected cordial relationship after Candace had called to apologize a year ago. A 12-step thing, she'd explained. They weren't friends, but they were both mothers of Trevor's children, and they'd found a mutual understanding in that. The text read, "Saw the news coverage of your gallery show. Proud of you, sister. You're showing our girls what rising looks like." Simone texted back, "Thank you. That means a lot." She meant it. There was something powerful about women who'd been hurt by the same man finding solidarity instead of animosity. They'd both survived Trevor's worst, and they'd both built better lives after him. A few weeks later, Simone got a call from a production company. They were doing a series on women entrepreneurs who'd built businesses after major life setbacks, and they wanted to feature her story. It would involve cameras in her office, interviews with her family and clients, following her through several projects. "I don't know," Simone told Rashida. "It feels exploitative. Like they want the trauma porn, you know? Poor abandoned pregnant woman makes good." "Or," Rashida countered, "it's a chance to show other women what's possible. To prove that being left doesn't mean being less. Your story could help people, Simone." "I'll think about it." She talked to Lawrence, who supported whatever she decided. She talked to her mother, who said, "If you do it, make sure you control your own story. Don't let them edit you into something you're not." She talked to Dr. Morgan, her therapist, who helped her examine her hesitation. "What are you afraid of?" Dr. Morgan asked. "That they'll reduce me to my trauma. That they'll make it all about Trevor leaving instead of about what I built. So make it clear that's not the story you're telling. You control the narrative. If they want your story, they get it on your terms." Simone agreed to do it with specific conditions. Editorial approval, focus on the business and the work, honest portrayal of her support system. They'd film over 3 months, capturing her process, her challenges, her wins. The cameras followed her to job sites. They interviewed Mrs. Thompson, who gave a moving testimonial about giving young women chances. They talked to her clients, her employees, her mother. They filmed her with Isaiah, showing the reality of balancing motherhood and business ownership. They even briefly interviewed Trevor, who was honest about his failures and her strength. "She was always talented," Trevor said to the camera. "I just didn't appreciate what I had until it was gone. She's built something remarkable and she did it without any help from me. That's all her." When the episode aired 6 months later, Simone watched it with her family, Lawrence, Isaiah, her mother, Rashida. She cried through most of it, seeing her journey played back with music and editing that somehow made it feel both more dramatic and more real than living it had been. The response was overwhelming. Her business phone rang constantly. The website crashed from traffic. She got interview requests from national publications. Women reached out sharing their own stories of starting over. Some wanted to hire her. Others just wanted to say thank you for showing them it was possible. "You've inspired people," Lawrence said that night after everyone had left and Isaiah was in bed. "You should be proud of that." "I'm overwhelmed by it. All I did was survive and build a business." "That's not heroic." "It is to people who are where you were 5 years ago. To them, you're proof that the story doesn't end with the heartbreak." "That's powerful, Simone." She leaned against him, processing it all. Her life had become something she never imagined, not just successful but publicly successful. Her story was out there now, part of the cultural conversation about resilience and rebuilding. It felt vulnerable and empowering at the same time. Late that night, unable to sleep, Simone went to her home office and opened her laptop. She started writing, not a business plan or a client proposal but something else. Her story in her own words. The parts the TV show couldn't capture. The midnight panic attacks. The days she wanted to give up. The small victories nobody saw. The transformation that happened inside her before it showed up in her business. She wrote until sunrise, pouring it all out. When she finished, she had 30 pages of raw, honest narrative. She saved it, unsure what to do with it. But it felt important to have written it, to have claimed her story completely. Maybe someday she'd share it. Maybe it would become a book or a blog or something else. Or maybe it would just sit in her files, a reminder to herself of how far she'd come. Either way, it was hers. All of it, the pain, the growth, the success, the story. That's what Trevor had tried to take when he left. Her story, her future, her sense of self. But Simone had reclaimed it all, rewritten the ending, and created something beautiful from the broken pieces. She'd risen. And she was still rising. The wedding was small, held in the backyard of their home in Brooklyn on a warm Saturday in October. Simone had insisted on simple. No grand production, no extravagant expense, just the people who mattered most bearing witness to something that felt both momentous and like the natural next step they'd been building toward for 3 years. She stood in her bedroom, her mother helping her zip up the cream-colored dress she'd chosen. Not white. She'd been married before, and this felt different enough that white seemed wrong. The cream dress was elegant and simple, with lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that moved when she walked. "You look beautiful, baby," Diane said, tears already forming in her eyes. "Absolutely beautiful." "Mama, don't cry yet. You'll get me started." "I can't help it. My baby's getting married. Again. But this time to someone who deserves you." There was a knock on the door. Isaiah poked his head in, dressed in his little suit with a bow tie that Lawrence had helped him tie that morning. "Mama, everyone's ready? Can you come now?" "Almost, baby. Give me 2 more minutes." Isaiah disappeared, and Simone could hear him running down the hall yelling, "2 minutes." She said 2 minutes. Simone looked at herself in the mirror. 7 years since Trevor had walked out. 7 years of rebuilding, of learning to trust again, of creating a life that felt solid and true. She wasn't the same woman who'd been abandoned, pregnant, and terrified. That woman had been broken open, and from that breaking had emerged someone stronger, someone who knew her own worth. "You ready for this?" Diane asked. "More than ready, Mama." The ceremony was officiated by Pastor Mitchell, who'd watched Simone grow up, who'd been there through the divorce, who'd counseled her through some of her darkest days. Now he stood in front of their makeshift altar, a simple arch covered in flowers that Simone had arranged herself, with a smile that said he'd been waiting for this moment. Lawrence stood beside him with his best man, looking nervous and excited. Hannah was there as a bridesmaid, wearing the purple dress she'd picked out herself. She'd warmed to Simone over the years, slowly letting her guard down until one day she'd called Simone and asked advice about a boy at school, and Simone had known they'd turned a corner. Rashida was Simone's maid of honor, dabbing at her eyes before the ceremony had even started. "I'm not crying," she insisted to anyone who looked at her. "I have allergies." Isaiah walked Simone down the short aisle to where Lawrence waited. Her son took his job very seriously, walking slowly and carefully, holding tightly to her hand. When they reached Lawrence, Isaiah looked up at him solemnly. "You have to be nice to my mama forever," Isaiah announced. "That's the rule." The guests laughed. Lawrence crouched down to Isaiah's level. "That's my plan, buddy. Forever and ever." "Okay." Isaiah went to sit with Diane, satisfied that he'd done his job. Pastor Mitchell began the ceremony with words about love and resilience, about how sometimes we have to travel through darkness to find our way home. He talked about second chances and blended families and the courage it takes to trust again after being hurt. Simone and Lawrence come to this moment having both survived their own trials, Pastor Mitchell said. They don't come to each other as people who need saving, but as whole people choosing to build something together. That's the strongest foundation there is. When it was time for vows, Lawrence went first. His hands shook slightly as he held Simone's. Simone, I didn't know I was waiting for you until I met you. I thought my story was over, that I'd had my chance at love and lost it. But you showed me that endings can be beginnings. You taught me that strength doesn't mean not being scared, it means moving forward anyway. I promise to show up every day. I promise to listen even when it's hard. I promise to love you and Isaiah and to honor the life you built before I entered it. I promise to add to what you've created, never to diminish it. I promise to stay, Simone. Through everything, I promise to stay. Simone's turn. She'd written and rewritten her vows a dozen times, trying to capture everything she felt. But standing there, looking at Lawrence's face, she abandoned the memorized words and spoke from her heart. Lawrence, you came into my life when I'd finally figured out how to be okay alone. I didn't need you to save me or fix me or complete me. I was already whole. But you made being whole so much sweeter. You showed me that love doesn't have to hurt. That partnership can mean lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. You've been patient with my fears and my walls. You've loved my son like he was your own. You've given me space to grow while growing beside me. I promise to trust you even when my past makes trust scary. I promise to build this life with you as equals. I promise to love you fiercely and honestly. And I promise that whatever we face it together. No running. No hiding. Just us working through it. Pastor Mitchell pronounced them married. Lawrence kissed her gently, and their small gathering erupted in cheers and applause. Isaiah jumped up and down yelling, "My mama got married." Hannah was crying. Diane and Lawrence's mother were hugging each other. Even Rashida had given up pretending she wasn't emotional. Trevor was there, standing at the back with Brianna. He'd asked if he could come, and after talking it over with Lawrence, Simone had agreed. It felt right somehow, having him witness this moment. Proof that they'd all moved forward, that the past could be acknowledged without defining the future. As Simone and Lawrence walked back down the aisle together, she caught Trevor's eye. He smiled, genuinely happy for her, she could tell, and mouthed, "Congratulations." She nodded back. No bitterness. No pain. Just acknowledgement of how far they'd all traveled. The reception was in their backyard, catered by the same soul food restaurant where Simone's parents had their wedding reception. There was dancing and laughter and toasts that made everyone cry and laugh in equal measure. Rashida's toast: "I've known Simone since we were 19 and thought we knew everything. I've watched her weather storms that would have destroyed most people. But she didn't just survive, she thrived. She built an empire, raised an incredible son, and found love that's real and lasting. Lawrence, you're a lucky man. Simone, you're a lucky woman. And I'm lucky to witness this. To new beginnings." Mrs. Eleanor Thompson's toast: "I hired a young mother with a baby on her hip and fear in her eyes 7 years ago. She turned my house into a home and showed me what determination looks like. Simone, you've become the woman your grandmother prayed you'd be. Keep rising, child. Keep rising." Even Trevor's father, Robert, raised a glass to doing the hard work of becoming better, to second chances and new starts, to families built from love, not just blood, and to Simone, who showed us all what resilience looks like. When it was time for the first dance, Lawrence led Simone to the makeshift dance floor they'd set up on the patio. The DJ played their song, not a traditional wedding song, but one that felt right for them, Best Part by Daniel Caesar. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Henderson?" Lawrence whispered as they swayed. "Like the luckiest woman alive," Simone answered honestly. "And a little overwhelmed. But the good kind of overwhelmed. I love you. I love you too." Isaiah and Brianna ran around the yard playing with the other children who'd come. Cousins, friends, kids, creating the kind of joyful chaos that children bring to celebrations. Hannah danced with her friends from school. Diane and Lawrence's mother were thick as thieves, already making plans for Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. As the sun set and the string lights they'd hung in the trees began to glow, Simone found herself standing at the edge of the yard, taking it all in. This moment, this life, this hard-won happiness. Her mother came up beside her. "What are you thinking about? How different this is from my first wedding. That day I was so young and so sure everything would be perfect forever. Today I'm older and I know nothing's perfect. But this feels more real, more solid. That's because you built it on truth instead of fantasy. You know who you are now. You know what you need. That's worth more than any fairy tale. Mama, thank you. For everything. For taking me in when I had nowhere to go. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For being there every single day. Diane pulled her daughter close. That's what mothers do, baby. We show up. We hold on. We believe. And then one day we get to watch our babies fly, and it makes all the hard days worth it. Later, after most of the guests had left and only family remained, Simone and Lawrence stood together watching the cleanup crew pack up chairs and tables. Isaiah was asleep on the couch inside, still in his suit. Hannah was showing Brianna something on her phone. Trevor was helping Diane box up leftover food, the two of them chatting amiably about Isaiah's progress in school. It's surreal, Simone said. All of us here together. Getting along. Being family. Families are complicated, Lawrence said. But the best ones figure it out. We figured it out. We did. That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Simone walked through the rooms of her home. Her home. Not the apartment Trevor had put her out of. Not her mother's house where she'd fled. Not even just her home anymore, their home. Hers and Lawrence's and Isaiah's and Hannah's when she visited. Every room told a story. The kitchen where she taught Isaiah to cook. The living room where they had family movie nights. The office where she ran her business. Isaiah's room, covered in his artwork and books. The master bedroom she now shared with someone who chose her every day. She ended up in her home office, looking at the vision board she'd made years ago when she was just starting out. Most of the goals had been achieved. Successful business, financial stability, her own home, Isaiah thriving. She added a new sticky note, built a family, chose love, stayed open. On her desk was the manuscript she'd written months ago, her story in her own words. She'd been thinking about it lately, about maybe turning it into a book. Not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. Because her story might help someone else who was standing in their kitchen watching their life fall apart. Someone who needed to know that the ending they were experiencing wasn't the ending of their story. She opened her laptop and started a new document, Rising, a love letter to women rebuilding after betrayal. Lawrence found her there an hour later, typing away. You're supposed to be on your wedding night, he teased gently. I know. I just had this thought and I needed to get it down. I think I'm going to write a book. About your journey? About rebuilding after devastation. About finding yourself when you've lost everything. About choosing to rise instead of staying broken. Not just my story, but a guide for others going through it. Lawrence sat on the edge of her desk. That sounds exactly like something you'd do. Build something from your pain to help others. Is that okay? That I'm working on our wedding night? It's perfect. Too. And I married you, all of you, including the part that wakes up at midnight with ideas that can't wait. Simone saved her document and stood up, taking Lawrence's hand. Okay, the idea is captured. Now let's go be married people. They walked upstairs together, past Isaiah's room where their son slept peacefully, to their bedroom where a life they'd built together waited. Outside, the city hummed with its endless motion. Inside, Simone Davis Henderson settled into her new reality, not perfect but real and solid in hers. She'd survived abandonment. She'd rebuilt from nothing. She'd learned to trust again. She'd created a business, raised a son, blended a family, and found love that felt safe and true. She'd risen from the ashes of her broken marriage and built something more beautiful than she'd lost. Trevor had left her 7 years ago, thinking he was choosing something better. He'd regretted it, realizing too late what he'd thrown away. But his leaving had given Simone something unexpected. The chance to discover her own strength, to build her own empire, to become someone she might never have been if he'd stayed. In the end, his biggest mistake had been her greatest blessing. And now, lying beside someone who chose her every day in a home she'd earned, with a life she'd built, Simone Davis Henderson closed her eyes and felt something she hadn't felt in years, complete peace. She'd found her way home. Not to a place but to herself. And that was the happiest ending of all.